Hello everyone, my name is Sam Aguirre. I am the Director of WIDA Español and Assistant Director of Consortium Relations at WIDA. I will share a bit more about WIDA and my work in just a moment. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the native lands we occupy. WIDA is a project at the Wisconsin Center for Education Research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The university is built on the ancestral land of the Ho-Chunk Nation, in what is today Madison, Wisconsin. Today, UW-Madison respects the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation, along with 11 other First Nations of Wisconsin. I find it important that we acknowledge our histories and past, and that we take the time to acknowledge the native peoples on whose lands we reside. Here's an overview of this presentation. I'll be discussing who are English learners and former ELs, ways in which we celebrate linguistic identities through the Seal of Biliteracy, as well as ways in which we can support and celebrate its attainment, and the impact the Seal of Biliteracy has on ELs and former ELs. Now, you may be wondering, what is WIDA? Well, just to give you some background, at the core of our work, you'll find the WIDA English Language Development Standards and the Spanish Language Development Standards. The standards guide the development of tools that support educators with the teaching of the Spanish and the English language. We also provide professional learning for the teaching of both languages and assessments that can help educators track the progress of language development. In the US, WIDA is composed of 41 state education agencies. Washington State has recently joined the consortium. We also have a WIDA International School Consortium with over 450 member schools and an early years consortium focused on the learning of English for young language learners. As mentioned earlier, we are housed at the Wisconsin Center for Education Research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. As I mentioned, I am the Director of WIDA Español and Assistant Director of Consortium Relations at WIDA. For WIDA Español, I oversee the development of research, tools, and professional learning for educators teaching Spanish in the US and abroad. For WIDA, I represent the organization on consortium activities. As a combination of these two roles, I support the Seal of Biliteracy, be it the global seal or a state or local Seal of Biliteracy, that is awarded to students learning Spanish and English. All right. On to our conversation for today. Let's start by defining English learners and former English learners. Multilingual learners is a term that is becoming quite common in the US, but has been used abroad for quite some time. At WIDA, multilingual learners refers to all children and youth who are or have been consistently exposed to multiple languages. It includes students known as English learners or dual language learners, heritage language learners, former English learners, and students who speak varieties of English or indigenous languages are also included in this term. In the US, the term EL is quite common to refer to students who have been assessed and identified as needing language supports to fully engage with academic content in English. Once students meet a proficiency criteria, normally set by an assessment for English language proficiency, students move from being ELs to former ELs. Today, I want us to focus on these two groups. The reason why ELs and former ELs are multilingual learners is that they know one or more languages from their home before they arrive in school. Because these students enter school speaking a language and learn English as well, you would imagine that most of them would apply for and attain a Seal of Biliteracy. However, that is not always the case. In the US, over 4,800,000 students are identified as ELs. That number does not include former ELs who have already met proficiency in English. Therefore, if we added former ELs to the count, we are talking about many, many more students. On a report prepared by Arthur Cho at sealofbiliteracy.org, he documented that there were over 90,000 State Seal of Biliteracy recipients in 2018. However, most states did not compile data for ELs or former ELs. Having worked in Illinois during that year, we found that only about 806 ELs attained the Illinois State Seal or Commendation towards biliteracy, out of 8,802 total awards. As a reference point, that year, 5,167 ELs graduated from high school in Illinois. Not all of those ELs would have qualified for the Seal of Biliteracy, but I am sure that we could have done a much better job at getting more ELs to apply for the award and recognize their bilingualism in the process. You'll notice that these numbers do not include former ELs, as that data was not tracked consistently in school districts across Illinois. Now, the data presented here is not unique to Illinois. Other states have experienced the same outcomes, and few ELs have received the State Seal of Biliteracy. Therefore, we really need to do a better job at supporting these students in attaining the award. Now, let's talk a little bit about the why. The Seal of Biliteracy was initiated in California in 2009 with the intention to celebrate the linguistic identities of ELs and former ELs. Parents of multilingual learners in California came together to celebrate the bilingualism of their students. Therefore, it is at the core of this movement that we celebrate ELs and former ELs. The Seal of Biliteracy has the potential to highlight the linguistic assets of students, elevate the value of bilingualism in our communities, strengthen bilingual education programs in our schools, and all the while, better prepare students for success in college and career. Regardless of what students do after high school, bilingualism is an asset. Recognizing that strength through an award makes a big difference. Let's look at ways in which we can support ELs and former ELs in attaining the Seal of Biliteracy. If you're a teacher, you can support ELs and former ELs in preparing for and applying to the Seal of Biliteracy by identifying who may qualify, encouraging ELs and former ELs to apply, and informing their parents about this opportunity for their students. Keep in mind that oftentimes, students need a bit of encouragement. Most ELs and former ELs may think of their bilingualism as something that is taken for granted because of how much their instruction is focused on learning English. By changing the narrative and uplifting their multilingualism, teachers can have a major impact on the value that students see on their languages and can be more motivated to pursue a Seal of Biliteracy. For example, I was talking to a high school teacher of Heritage Spanish for Spanish speakers. His students were at different levels of Spanish proficiency. However, many of them took the class because it was easy, since they knew Spanish already. I know you've heard that line before as well. The teacher uplifted the status of Spanish in his class and encouraged every student to apply to the Seal of Biliteracy, which at the same time allowed the students to see their bilingualism at a whole different level. Now, if you're an administrator at a school or a school district, you should consider reviewing the data and identifying areas of opportunity for increasing the number of ELs and former ELs that are receiving the Seal of Biliteracy. Also, remind teachers to support ELs and former ELs in applying to the Seal and informing the community of this opportunity. The data will show you how many of your ELs or former ELs are not receiving the Seal of Biliteracy, and whether you need to add this as a target population for this work. Because you may not regularly interact with students, connecting with teachers and making sure that they are promoting the Seal of Biliteracy to their students is also important. Lastly, remember that as an administrator, you have a dual role of engaging with teachers and with external peers. Therefore, create opportunities to celebrate ELs and former ELs for receiving the seal. That normally energizes parents and the community, and further encourages students to apply for the award. Let's now look at ways in which we can celebrate ELs and former ELs who attain a Seal of Biliteracy. You can celebrate the Seal of Biliteracy recipients in many ways. Here's some recommendations. As a classroom teacher, you can host a classroom or virtual event to recognize your ELs and former ELs who attained the Seal of Biliteracy. This will not only make the students feel accomplished, but will also motivate others to pursue the award. You may celebrate all students in your classroom regardless of EL status, but it certainly helps to highlight ELs and former ELs for their linguistic diversity. You should also consider sharing the news of the award with other teachers. That way, your peers can also recognize your ELs and former ELs for their strengths, and others across the school building will be happy for them as well. This will not only have an impact on the student, but the school culture at the same time. Another idea is to highlight your students' accomplishments via communications with parents. The parents will hear about their children's accomplishments, and at the same time, it'll start making a difference about the way in which you interact with those parents and that community. As an administrator, you should consider sharing the list of EL and former EL awardees with others in leadership and have them communicate with joy, that joy that they're experiencing with the students. This can make a big difference in the way students view their bilingualism and multilingualism. Additionally, you should highlight their accomplishments in community newsletters, the school or district webpage, or other communication vehicles that your district may provide. Yet, another way to celebrate your ELs and former ELs when they attain the Seal of Biliteracy is by hosting an award ceremony. These have become quite popular over the last few years. Even though you may not be able to bring all students together for a celebration in person, you can do a virtual ceremony and invite the school principals or district superintendent to share in the joy. As with the school level, including your peers in administration can have a very positive impact on the students and the community at large. So you've helped get your ELs and former ELs to get to apply for and receive the Seal of Biliteracy. You've also provided opportunities to celebrate their accomplishments. So what's next? Let's talk a little bit about the impact for celebrating linguistic identities. ELs and former ELs are currently underrepresented in the numbers of students who receive the Seal of Biliteracy. If that is the case in your school as well, I challenge you to change that. In supporting your ELs and former ELs to attain the Seal of Biliteracy, you can elevate their bilingualism and multilingualism so that it is not only you who recognizes it, but other educators, students, and families with whom you work. Attaining the award can also help change the narrative of ELs or former ELs from lacking English to multilinguals. In the process, you are celebrating the linguistic and cultural diversity of your classroom and your school, which can have a positive impact on the school community and all the other ELs and former ELs with whom you work. Most importantly, use the Seal of Biliteracy as a way to celebrate the linguistic identities of your students. By supporting your students to attain the Seal of Biliteracy, you're taking a stand to celebrate and further validate their identities as young multilingual learners. This is a short presentation, but if you have additional questions or thoughts, please send them to me. I am always open to a conversation on ways in which we can continue to celebrate our multilingual learners, and the acquisition of the Seal of Biliteracy can make a big difference in your students and your community. You can send them at my email address at Aguirre, that's SAAGUIRRE @wisc.edu. Lastly, I encourage you to stay connected with WIDA and WIDA Español via our social media channels. I also want you to go to Twitter now, if you can, and tag @WIDA_UW and post something that you've learned on this session that is motivating you. If you're sharing that, you're also encouraging others around you to promote multilingualism. WIDA will be retweeting some of the tweets that we get tagged on. So if I see your message, I may just retweet it so that it reaches many more educators across the WIDA consortium. That is it for me. So thank you for listening in and for tuning in. And thank you for all the work that you're doing for multilingual learners, including English learners and former English learners. We really gotta continue to support our students so that they can all have access to and attain a Seal of Biliteracy. Enjoy the rest of Global C.R.E.D, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the future. Take care. Bye.